Hello everyone, I'm Theo Eschart from Henry Stewart Events, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, How to be a Helicopter Brand Manager, Keeping an Eye on Your Content Post-Distribution, kindly sponsored by Fadel. During the session, please send through your questions at any time using the questions box on your GoToWebinar side panel. Also a reminder that a recording of this session will be sent to you tomorrow so you can view it again at your own pace. Now it's my great pleasure to pass you over to Gregg Guest, Vice President of Product Management at Fadel, and Tom Sloan, Global Solutions Lead, Digital Asset Management at ICP. Thank you, and over to you.
All right, thanks, Theo. It's great to be back here with Henry Stewart and with my colleague Tom. Very excited, Tom, to be here with you today to discuss a very important topic of kind of how you keep track of your assets as they move through their production life cycle and beyond, right, into post-distribution, and how you can, some of the technology we're seeing and some of the methodologies we're seeing being used to keep an eye on that. I'm Vice President of Management, Product Management at Fadel. As Theo said, I've been working in this space for many, many years. So happy to be back here with Henry Stewart. Tom?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, thanks to you and the team at Fadel and to Henry Stewart Events for inviting me to join today. And hi, everybody, and thanks for taking the time to listen to us talk about this topic. My name is Tom Sloan. I'm ICP's Global Solution Lead for Digital Asset Management. And yeah, Greg, like you, 15, 16 years in the digital asset management, content management world. And yeah, this certainly is a topic that we get asked a lot of questions about, and it feels like you know, the capabilities and the approaches are becoming clearer. And yeah, looking forward to getting stuck into this.
Tell us just a little bit about ICP. What ICP is, what you do there.
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, ICP specializes in content operations in this field very specifically, and we're not a technology vendor, but we're a service provider, and we really help our clients to identify, deploy, and embed optimal content technologies and those supporting processes to deliver against, you know, those business objectives and those business outcomes. So, you know, anything from you know, supporting selection to supporting with that implementation and configuration process, through to working out the best way of getting these things running in business as usual and embedding them as part of those day-to-day processes and get the most sort of value out of those investments. So so yeah, digital asset management, but the broader content operations sphere is really what we call home.
Great. Yeah, a lot of great stuff. And we Fadel, obviously, we are a technology vendor. We offer, you know, products in the brand compliance space, software products. So, all right, without further ado, let's get into it. Tom, take it away.
Yeah, so I'll start off here by providing a little bit of context, I suppose. You know, I think we're going to get to that post-publication, that post-distribution opportunity. But I think before we do that, let's quickly just remind ourselves and refamiliarize ourselves with you know, the typical content lifecycle, because I think it sets the foundations for some of the things that we're going to see and talk about in a bit more detail. And this, you know, may not be a totally unfamiliar concept to those of you that are joining us. It's a version that we use to present and articulate this. But, you know, when we think about you know, how we can effectively track content post-publication and things we can do, really the journey to being able to do that starts all the way at the beginning, right? And we have to think about how we set ourselves up to do that effectively. So, you know, from that content creation perspective, through the import of that content into content operations technologies, the tagging of that content with relevant information, the management and then eventual publish or distribution of that content, all the way through that content's life cycle, be it towards archival, reuse, but, you know, fundamentally, it's also an opportunity to understand more about where that content ends up, how it performs, and how we can use that information to make better decisions about managing content, and even better decisions about what kind of content and what kind of channels we want to focus investment on as well. So really sort of trying to understand how we can leverage technologies and capability to deliver that kind of content insight that's so valuable to these programs, because it evidences that return on investment, right? That many of us are constantly seeking to explain. So this really just to set the scene for that end-to-end life cycle piece, because we are going to talk about that a little bit at the beginning of this webinar. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry to
Greg.
jump in. It's a beautiful slide, Tom. I love it. But as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on that slide, right? And so not only are there, multiple pie pieces, so to speak, in the process there, as you move around the circle, but then flanking it on either side, I think speaks to the volume and complexity of the world that you're dealing with your assets, as far as the different asset and content types, which are always expanding, and the kind of omni-channel distribution platforms that are also always expanding. So we're just in this kind of expanding universe that keeps getting more and more complex. And I think this slide captures that well.
Yeah, and you begin speaking there, Greg, to some of the additional complexities to managing content at scale, and I think as we maybe move on to the next slide, we can kind of get to grips with some familiar challenges perhaps that we're seeing, and that those of us on this call will be seeing as well, both in terms of content creation and in terms of distribution. So the different types of assets, assets created for specific purposes and used in specific ways, whether they're brand focused, whether they're creative and lifestyle, whether they're product focused, whether they're non-visual content types as well, for example. Lots of different sources of that content created in-house by in-house agencies, by agency partners, all following maybe slightly different processes or with different levels of understanding. The various renditions, variations, localizations of that content that might need to happen for larger, more global businesses, the different channels in which we want to get this content in front of our users, and the different formats that have different technical and conflicting implications as well, from video to image. There are different things to consider and different challenges with trying to track and understand where that content's used. And then there's the distribution side, right, which is that variety of platforms or sites or end locations that we know about and that we own and can control to a degree, as well as some of those other platforms where we have less control, less ownership, and less visibility traditionally. So really, take that content life cycle, take what you need to do to manage content and get it to that distribution point, and then think about these things that amplify the complexity through their scale as well.
Yeah, I think it again really speaks to the exponential nature of what we're seeing in the market, as far as if you multiply the different formats you need to have for your assets, the different, as you said, personalizations there for region, or brand or campaign, multiply that by the various sites that you need to distribute it to, and the scale is just enormous, which is what's making it more and more challenging to keep track of that content throughout its life cycle. And at Fidel, we work with small and large companies, and on the larger scale, on the large end, the volume is just intense. I mean, we work with companies that have over 4 million rights managed assets across 40 brands or more, and within each of those, they're personalizing and tailoring their content by geography, and then obviously distributing it in a variety of formats and different transformations and renditions to over 200 sites, so hundreds of sites that this content's going out to in 150 countries around the world, and they have about 5,000 images per month that are expiring. So that's a lot to keep track of, you can't. It's at the point where maybe in the past you could do this with some manual process, but with this type of scale, you can't really do it manually. You need technology to help you with this. And even if you're on the smaller side, chances are if you're successful, you're going to be growing, and you're going to be growing on this curve and getting into these scales. So it's best to think about having those processes and technologies in place ahead of time and be prepared for that scale of content that's going to require automation.
Yeah, and I think, you know, some of the benefits or some of the opportunities that being able to track content can provide might be quite obvious, and there are some obvious ones in here, but just to sort of, you know, go over some of those opportunities and reinforce what might be possible if we can keep an eye on that content in the digital wild. There's sort of 4 things that we call out here. I don't think it's exhaustive. I think there's a lot more specific benefits that different companies might be able to identify and be able to realize that are maybe more unique to them. But typically, being able to really have at your fingertips that ability to oversee, you know, the usage rights that you have against where things are being used, being able to properly manage the expiration of that content, being able to monitor its usage and ensure that it's being used as intended in the channels and in the geographies that it is licensed to be used for, and you know, having a sort of a native capability to move quickly by being able to clear things against the data that we store against it. There is a significant opportunity to combine this really effectively with a talent management need, which is going to be greater and lesser for specific businesses, but you know, where talent is involved, the importance of doing this right and respecting the rights of that talent is really important, both visibly to consumers, you know, in terms of what they're seeing and what they understand those relationships between a brand and that talent to be, but also commercially and legally. You don't necessarily want to cause conflict or to cause a decline in a relationship with a brand ambassador or somebody that you're working with. Brand consistency and control is always on topic for brand managers and people working with visual content for a particular business. But you know, being able to understand where older content or out-of-date content is still in existence, and being able to replace that quickly, swiftly, accurately with up-to-date content is a perpetual challenge, and especially where things in the digital wild can be so exponential, you know, an ability to take greater control of that is important. And then there's the performance component here, which is always, or maybe sometimes considered nice to have, but once you get into a place where you have the capability to manage content effectively to distribution channel and to get it in front of users, then it becomes about, well, what can we learn about this content and how can we make better creative decisions or greater advertising investment decisions, and we can continue to refine those processes so that we're not spending too much money in one area and we're spending you know, the right amount of money on the right content in other areas too. So, you know, just a snapshot here, but you know, the capability or the opportunity to really benefit from these different advances in these different areas, I think is definitely on the table if we can track our content in the wild properly. One of the first things I think to try to tackle is, and we've kind of alluded to it already, but you know, in order to be in a position where we can track content effectively, make the right management decisions about that content, get the right data about that content once it's in the wild and after it's been published, is really applying a little bit of focus to what we do at the beginning or nearer the beginning of the process. So, you know, in order to set ourselves up in the best way, we need to understand what are the key things that we need to be doing right earlier. Greg, from a Fidel perspective, are there some sort of good practices, good capabilities that you can showcase here that help people understand what that might look like?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I think, you know, it starts with kind of some stuff that'll be very familiar to, you know, folks working in the DAM space, as far as things like a metadata model, an extensible metadata model, being able to capture various types of metadata around your assets. And then, really, if you want to track things like misuse, violations, expirations, as we talk more about the content tracking part of this, you need to be able to capture some of that rights information up front. And it could be basic rights capture, but as you grow and as your content becomes more complex, we typically see the need for data models that allow for a much more complicated set of rights management to be captured, and that typically involves taking that to the agreement level, to the talent agreement level. So if you have videos, et cetera, that you're working with that have multiple models in it, along with music rights, along with location releases, producer, director restrictions, et cetera, that unless you can get to that level where you track it relative to the talent that holds rights, it becomes very hard to understand what you can and can't do with an asset that's that complicated. So definitely, brought some technology to share today just to give a flavor of what that looks like. If I switch over to, I'm going to use our brand vision brand compliance platform to do some demonstrations here. But the important thing to remember is we're really talking about processes and types of technology, and there's many ways you can come at this from a technological standpoint once you understand kind of what the requirements are to be able to get there, and then you can assess the technology you have or the technology that's available and that you could benefit from. So, starting off kind of, as I said, on kind of the DAM side, the real kind of pure DAM side, you want to make sure that you have a place where you can capture your assets, you can create assets in a digital asset repository, and be able to create new assets and track them with a good deal of metadata, which includes both basic metadata as well as categorization, tagging, things like that. This really provides kind of searchability in your DAM so that you can find content, organize content, et cetera. And then you want to be able to capture that, kind of with metadata that makes sense. And you really want to have an extensible metadata model that allows you to add custom metadata very easily, so you can track different information about an asset that really relates to your business and what you're doing with your business and with your campaigns and projects, et cetera. And then, if you're doing a lot of asset sharing, you might want to capture things like IPTC data, EXIF data from your camera. As much metadata as you can possibly get about your asset is going to help you manage that asset further down the line. And part of that's important is the rights and the rights management for an asset, and to be able to capture very specific rights that are available for that asset, which typically is based on an in-date, an out-date, a period of time, a region or territory, geography element, component, and the distribution channel. So as you see here, South American, North American rights for digital and broadcast for the period of a year, annual rights. And that's a very simple, basic rights management capture, but even that can be hard in some DAMs to be able to capture in just an express metadata field. So if it's very, very simple, you might be able to do that. But once you start to get complex and you start to have different windows, different talent, then you really start to need to have a tool that can do rights management at a more advanced level. And that really starts to bring things like talent into it. So being able to track the talent that you're working with and the talent that's associated to your assets. And again, most DAM systems don't really provide a means to capture this type of detailed talent information. So you need to think about how you're going to capture the talent information and have that be available, searchable, so you can easily find specific talent. You can drill down into that talent and understand not just contact information for that talent, so you can reach out to their agency or agent if you need to extend rights or things like that, or if you want to book them again because you've had successful performance with them in the past. But you can actually then start to capture agreements that are specific to that particular talent for a particular campaign. So here I have Willow, my model, and her talent agreement for the beauty campaign. And I can look at that agreement, and again, capture some information about that agreement, high level stuff like the execution date, the start date, but then most importantly, the rights of that agreement. And here you can see a little bit more complex rights setup. There's different rights for YouTube video, which is kind of worldwide rights that Willow has given us. And then social media rights specifically for a number of social media sites are a little more restricted by date range. And then, digital rights for digital marketing and digital website, brand website, et cetera, is very limited geographically. So again, hard data to capture in a kind of a standard metadata field, you kind of need something that's built for purpose there that you can capture all of this and then be able to tie it back to Willow to that agreement, and then be able to look at very simply the assets that are tied to that agreement that we've done with Willow and have access to tie that data back to that asset in your DAM so that you can see things like when that final expiration date for that asset is, or what the availability is. So if I come in here and I look at the availability for this asset, I don't have to go through and kind of figure out manually where the overlaps are between the agreements and models in this asset. I can just ask the system, hey, tell me, and again, this is why you need technology here, because the technology can look at that and go, tell me where I can use this and what I can use it for, and I can get that glimpse very easily.
Brilliant, thanks, Greg. I think one of the other layers of, oh, there you go. One of the other layers of complexity here that will be prevalent amongst global businesses is, okay, yeah, we need to capture this level of information, and that's going to help us do much more effective things downstream. But when we're sort of taking more time and more effort to do this properly up front, what are some of the ways that we can be efficient and that we can be optimal in doing this at scale, right? So when we think about a particular asset, perhaps there's localizations or different renditions, different versions that have been created from that master asset. Is that something that we need to then multiply this sort of tagging effort to handle? And similarly, just simply at scale, when you're thinking about multiple assets all at once, larger sets of assets, having a capability there that allows us to still retain a little bit of automation and be able to still manage this kind of process effectively is also going to be important. So I know that there are some ways that Fidel can do that. Is that something that we could look at also?
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as things like this is again sort of core DAM functionality we're talking about here that you want to make sure you have in your DAM system, as far as asset relationships, folder structure, things like that, et cetera. So yeah, I have some stuff there I can show for sure. Sorry, a little trouble with my windowing today. Okay, so again, you want to make sure that you have that single repository for your assets where you're storing all your assets, and that you have, for example, your metadata that you're capturing, your tagging, your AI tagging. That's all going to help with searchability of finding assets. You want to make sure they're organized around that in a way that makes sense for your business. So again, the ability to have that custom metadata that might organize it by product, by project, by brand, et cetera. And then that ability to have folder structure if you want to use folders to kind of segregate and organize content by folders. And when we talk about kind of formats and versions of assets, you need to make sure that you have those relationships in place in your digital asset management strategy. So we talked about like renditions, for example. If I want to, I have this single image, but depending upon where I'm publishing it to, I want to have access to various renditions, and I want to understand which renditions I have available for my assets, so that when I'm doing my content tracking, which we are going to get to soon enough, when you see the content tracking where this all kind of comes together, and you're finding these assets on Facebook, on Instagram, and they've been transformed. Instagram is a good example because it tends to be a vertical image. So for example, I might be cropping this to a vertical image, I want to make sure that I can track that in all the formats that I'm going to transform it into, and that be able to have technology that can say, hey, this image is slightly different. It's been cropped, it's been rotated, whatever we did to it to publish it to a certain platform. But I know it's the same image, and therefore, you can monitor the usage that way. Similar issue comes into play when you talk about versioning, and you have kind of versions of assets. Here I have, kind of two versions of this asset. It's just been mirrored and flipped, right? And so for some distribution cases or campaigns, I might be using the left-facing one. For something else, I might be using the right-facing because of the way I'm overlaying text or something like that, or the way I'm setting up a layout. You want to make sure that you have that relationship between those assets, so that when I track it, or when I want to understand if it's been used properly or whether it's violating anything, I can look at a single set of rights that apply to that asset, because the rights are the same. It's the same model, right? So even though I flipped it, the rights and restrictions that apply to that are still the same. And so you want to make sure that you're tracking those relationships between renditions, versions, and different iterations, if you will, of those files.
Thanks, Gregg. Yeah, I think the ability to draw back that connection without additional manual effort to create those relationships each time, a rendition or a slightly different version exists there is important, because otherwise each click there is adding effort and time to somebody's day, and it starts to make the process of managing this effectively really challenging, and typically what you tend to see in highly manual processes without the use of technology, or with the use of technology that can't quite build these relationships, is that people just don't do it, and you suffer from that lack of data and that lack of understanding and that lack of insight further down the line. So we're sort of moving through the content life cycle here and touching on some of the key points, some of the key enablers for doing content tracking right. Distribution and publication is sort of the final step before we get onto content tracking in its own right. A lot of time is spent in the ideation around content, in the creation of content, the review and approval of that content, the ingestion, the tagging. The final step of publishing that content, or putting it in front of the right people, the right consumers or other teams, is an opportunity to do this quickly and sort of not have a bottleneck in the final stage of the process. So are there some capabilities that you might be able to expand on here that showcase a little bit how we can do that directly, how we can do it easily, but I suppose more importantly, how we can do it with the confidence that we're not going to break any rules, right? And with the confidence that this is going to the right place based on the data we have and the rights that we've captured already.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where getting all your ducks in a row, so to speak, as we've been talking about, really starts to pay off, because you really get some value out of the technology if you've set up all that kind of data up front around your asset metadata, your rights data, your talent data, and you have in place the technology to manage and analyze that data. Then you really start to get the benefit when you talk about distribution and publishing, because like you said, the most important thing is get it out the door as fast as we can, get it out to market, and you don't want any roadblocks in that path for users that are trying to understand, can I publish it, can I not publish it? So this is where you really get a payoff in both risk mitigation, because you're protecting yourself from misuse, but also efficiency and speed. And so, for example, if I come back in here and look at my assets, and having things like integration, this is where also integration comes into the discussion. So having integration between your digital asset system and the other systems that you're working with can be helpful. So for example, if I want to be able to transfer assets really quickly out to my creative team or out to a different system or different department to be able to get approval on those or share those, having those integration capabilities is really powerful. In some cases, you may even have direct integration to publishing platforms for things like social media, et cetera, which can speed up the process. Of course, you want to make sure that you have those clearance checks in that process before those things get transferred or distributed out. And so in that case, you want to be able to have a clearance capability that allows you to, I'm going to show the one over here actually, that allows you to clear assets for usage. And so, once you have those, that rights information in the system, again, if it's very basic, a person can look at it and understand, oh, okay, it's worldwide rights. I can use it worldwide, right? But when you have, again, a group of assets for a campaign, and you have each of those assets having potentially multiple talent rights associated to it, or again, music rights if it's video, or location rights, et cetera, layering on top of each other, becomes very, very hard, even if you can capture it, for a person to look at it and understand what the answer is for a particular question. And that's, again, where technology can play an amazing role in helping you there with speed, because if I want to publish this campaign and I want to very quickly get an answer, I can use the technology to say, hey, can I publish this in Europe and North America broadcast, digital, and social media channels for this date range, for this monthly campaign that I'm doing, and instantly get that answer of yes, no, or maybe. And in this case, I have an asset that's not available. It doesn't have rights to anything that I asked for. I have one that is available that has all the rights I'm asking for. That's good. And I have one that's partially available, which means some of what I asked for is available, but something in here is going to be read. In fact, I don't have rights to France for some reason. France was restricted for this particular asset by this particular talent. Maybe they had a precluding contract in France or something, and so I'm not able to use it there. So very quickly, I can understand what I can and can't do with this content, and then I can adjust very quickly, right? So I can say, okay, fine, maybe let's just run this campaign in North America because we don't have France, or let me find another image here to swap in for this one, for the black and white image, because I don't have availability for that. So I can react quickly and make changes based on what I can and can't do with the content. And ideally, you want to provide that visibility back through your DAM so that users in your DAM don't have to call anybody, they don't have to go anywhere else, they can just get that information within the DAM. And so again, not a lot of DAMs have that type of sophisticated capability, but if there are ways to integrate that into your DAM or connect up to a system like BrandVision and feed that data into your DAM so that your DAM users can have it at their fingertips. The other part of distribution that's important to understand as we start getting to the technology of tracking is where am I publishing my content to, and understanding all the various places where my content goes. So, I have a YouTube channel, I have a Facebook stream, I have a brand website, an Instagram, I have e-retail stores on Amazon and other retailer sites, and starting to understand that so you know where to look for your content. Obviously, your content could go anywhere. So, the age-old question of I don't know what I don't know does come into play here sometimes. If I don't know where my content is, if I don't know where it is, but there are a lot of places where you know where your content is. And that's like probably 80 to 90% of where your content goes, if not higher. And so you can set up every place that you distribute content to so that you know where to look for content that's expiring and content that might be in violation.
I think it's not to be underestimated, the importance of having that understanding about how and where you can use content, and making the space and the time to capture this stuff appropriately. Because one of the things that we often see, even in enterprise solutions where content is well classified and it might be well tagged in other shapes and forms and styles, where rights information is loose, or it's weak, or it's, let's say, not comprehensive enough, what you tend to find is that users don't have the confidence that they can take and reuse that content, and they don't feel comfortable, or they feel it's too much of a long-winded process to find out who created that content in the first place, ask more questions about the rights, secure an extension, or even have an exchange over a number of days and weeks over whether or not it's suitable to reuse. And so what people tend to do is leverage that content management system, or that DAM system, as a repository and not as an engine for reuse. Whereas if you can empower people to make those decisions, feel comfortable that they can go ahead and reuse it in these channels and in these geographies, you get more organic reuse of that content, and you're able to take it a step further and demonstrate return on investment that ultimately is part of a business case for why many digital asset management systems are procured and implemented in the first place. So really not to be underestimated on the ability to catalog that rights information and present that effectively and give users the ability to understand it clearly. So I think that's a really interesting component.
Yeah, for sure. It makes me think of something I love, one of my favorite sayings, which is that people often forget the management part of digital asset management, right? And they think of digital asset management, DAM, as like you said, a repository for the assets, and store it and tag it with some metadata, and that's what a DAM is for. But managing an asset really goes far further than just kind of storing it in a DAM, right? Because and that's the main message I think we're trying to get across today, is that it has a whole life outside of just where it's stored in the DAM, right? And to your point, having that ability to look at how that asset has performed over time, where it's been used, how it's been used, of course making sure it's not misused, but also where and how it's been used can help to help you drive reuse, renewal. So many companies we work with over license stuff because they're not aware that they have something just as good that they could use that actually performed well. So
yeah, no, that's exactly right, and I think leads us quite nicely on to the post-publication component, really, of what we're looking at today. And it's an area that we want to apply a little bit more focus to, of course. I think what's interesting here is that typically when we think about how we track content post-publication in digital environments, this has been possible. It is possible to do this in a couple of different ways, and it has been possible historically, but it requires quite a significant technology investment. You need to be well integrated between your DAM and those downstream channels, or you need to spend quite a lot of time enforcing naming conventions so that when you extract data from all these different locations, you can normalize it and merge it and understand it and build those sort of connections between assets in channel and assets that are in your DAM, and know which things we're really talking about here. But I think what's interesting is that you guys at Fidel have an approach here that allows us to be a little bit more nimble than that. And I think if we think about the benefits of tracking this post-publication, being able to manage content effectively now that we know where it is, and being able to learn about its performance, it really extends the value of digital asset management and appropriate rights management as well. So I'll hand over to you to showcase a few things for us, Greg, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks. Yeah, and this is really the cool part of the demo, right? Because this is where the technology gets really really interesting and innovative. And as you said, we're trying to make it easy for you to do this, because there are multiple ways you can kind of track your content, but a lot of them require kind of a lot more heavy lifting or manual work, or altering assets in a way that allows you to track them, or tagging them in a way that allows you to track them. And we kind of rely more on obviously AI is helping with lots of stuff these days, and so we rely more on kind of an automated tracking an AI-based asset matching methodology, so that basically, if you've done everything that we've talked about so far today, if you've set up your assets in the right way, if you've captured the rights information, and if you understand and have kind of cataloged where your content is going, what sites you're publishing to, you don't need to do anything else. You can just turn this on, and it will go out and look for your assets. And so let me show you what I'm talking about. So here we have, as I showed before, the various distribution sites that I'm distributing my content to. And so if I look at my Facebook, for example, I have some information about my Facebook stream, and it's pretty simple. All I kind of have to do is point this indexer at the Facebook stream, and it will go regularly look at my Facebook feed, and it will index everything that's there. And for Facebook, for this particular Facebook setup, I'm looking at for images. We'll talk about video in a second, but here it's showing me every image that it found on my Facebook feed. And not all of those might be rights managed assets that I'm concerned with. It might not even be my assets, right? It might be something else. And so I can then drill down, kind of focus that telescope a little bit more into show me things that you found in my Facebook feed that actually match assets in my DAM that are rights managed assets that I need to worry about. And so this is really where the AI comes into place of doing visual matching. So there's no secret pixel, there's no link between file names or things like that. It's actually visually analyzing the images here and looking at if it's a matched image, and it's very powerful. So here, for example, you can see that this asset here, which is the asset in my DAM, is just the photo of the model, but the one that it actually found has some text overlaid on it and things done to it. So even if it's a transformed image, if there's overlays, if it's cropped, if it's rotated, if the color's changed, the technology is powerful enough to be able to recognize that that's the same image and show you that image. And then when you find that image, then you can kind of drill down into that asset and say, okay, where is it being used? And you can see there's the Facebook usage, and it's expired on Facebook. So based on the rights that we had captured for this particular asset, it's expired. So that's a problem. I got to pull it down, right? And I can also see it's been posted to Instagram, and it's missing rights for Instagram. There's some rights missing there for certain Instagram territories that I'm not allowed to publish that to. And again, in this case, you can see that there's different variations of the asset that have been used. So for different platforms, different geographies, different brands, there's different overlays, and the engine is able to make those matches. And it gets even cooler when you start to talk about video, which is more complex. So if I look at my YouTube site here where I'm tracking video, I can see, again, it found all the videos on my YouTube site. I can focus that lens in to show me the ones that match things in my DAM. And I can see, for example, this video that was found on my YouTube channel matched two videos in my DAM. One of them I can see is 100% match here. This green bar shows it's a full match, which means this is a 1-for-1 match video. And if I look at the time signature that matched, it'll show me that whole thing from 0 to 36 seconds is a complete match. This one on the top is a partial match, which means part of this video it was found partially in the video on YouTube. So if I look at that, I'll see that this segment in the middle of this clip that's in my DAM was taken out and used in a different video on my YouTube channel. And if I want to see where, I can get this really cool video look that shows, okay, in the video that we found, in the source video from our DAM, rather, this middle portion was used at the front part of that video that was found on YouTube. And if I show that part, you can kind of see the two videos there and how they match up in the middle. They're different videos, but part of it matches. So that's still a problem from a rights perspective. So to be able to have that accuracy and fidelity to see that type of match is super powerful. And it would be really hard to do that, manually, right? So that's again where the technology comes in. And then if I go and drill down into that asset and look at the usage, again, I can see for that particular thing, it's nearing expiration. And that's really what you want to capture, is that it's coming up for expiration, and that, I have the rights, or I have the rights and it's coming up for expiration, and I want to pull it down before it goes to the red status. And so that's really the power of the technology, the kind of automated tracking and indexing of different publication channels, and the AI matching of doing the visual matching for images and video. And we're working on music too, coming into that, so doing music matching. It's, you know, it's a very evolving space where the innovation just continues. I should mention, it's very helpful in other use cases too, not just expiring rights or missing rights, but things like rebranding. So if you're doing a rebranding and your logo has changed, technology like this is very good at going out and finding all the iterations of your old logo, right? So you can swap them out, make sure you don't have any old logos out there. Also, we've seen this with issues with the talent. So you might have some issue comes up with your spokesperson and you need to make a change or pull those assets down rapidly, and being able to kind of go out and find all the assets with a particular talent where they are and be able to pull them down. So it's not strictly the rights issues, it's a brand compliance tool that helps you across the board there. And if you put the proper reporting in place around it, you can do things like have usage violation reports going out. So, you know, I can kind of see everything at once of all my violations, where they are, and then I can kind of share that report or email that report to somebody to take care of the problems that arise there.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, and I think, you know, that just begins to give people maybe a glimpse of how somebody responsible for managing that content, its distribution, managing the rights associated to that content, can feel a little bit more powerful and a little bit more informed about what's going on and what sort of next action needs to be taken in terms of managing that content. Is it, hey, let's remove it and replace it with something else? Hey, let's extend rights and let's you know, retain that compliance, but you know, not get caught out by things being places that you don't know about, right? Or being reused places that you don't know about, because that never looks great. I think the flip side of the coin here with you know, the opportunity for tracking that content is also thinking about what that means for being able to track things like performance. And we've already touched on, you know, the center bit of this diagram, which is, can we connect master assets and derivatives together, so we get a good view of what derivatives of a master are being used in different places, in different regions, etc. But sort of bookending, you know, that capability, you know, if we can understand, you know, that the cost to create that asset on the upstream side, maybe it's from a procurement or an MRM tool, and we can understand performance, you know, what channel is it in, you know, what is the level of engagement with that asset over a given period, we begin to have, you know, the core building blocks for obtaining and extracting real insight. And when we think about, well, what kind of insight, what kind of capability might that deliver to content management practitioners? On the next slide, we can start to give a couple of examples, right? If we think about, you know, what is the asset performance? So, you know, is it likes, shares, clicks, depending on the channel, different metrics will be relevant. And typically that's relative to other content, you know, deployed in that channel, because some of those types of engagement are specific. What are the types of things we can understand? Well, what does that mean for the type of creative that we produce, or the style or the tone of creative that we're producing for that channel, for that audience, right? Can we start to make better decisions at the ideation and the concepting stage right at the beginning of that life cycle, so that more of our content is more effective? We also can begin to understand what types of content are more effective across different channels. And channels are not only owned channels, but often they're paid for channels that require investment and a portion of that marketing or advertising budget as well. So we're then able to understand, well, what types of content perform better in what types of channels, and how do we perhaps need to adjust our channel strategy there and the level of investment there to ensure we're as optimal as possible. It's not normally about removing a channel, but it's about making sure that you're getting the right content to that channel, because it typically performs better. And finally, you know, you begin to bring all of that together and understand not just original use of a master asset or original use of an adaptation, but subsequent reuse of that content together with its original cost and together with its performance, and you're able to really understand what that sort of return on investment for content is. Where could we or should we be driving more reuse? What content is typically providing greater lifetime value, and therefore, should we maybe think about investing more in or being more smarter about how we're marketing that internally, that availability of that content to use. So, not just from a management of content perspective, but some of the opportunity that provides us to start doing things that maybe more typically or more traditionally have been beyond our ability to see or to do or to action from a digital asset management practitioner perspective now become possible to do with data that is reliable, through the intelligence of the content matching approach, for example, through being able to do this at scale, leveraging the technology to do that, and with that reduction in manual overhead. It's often deprioritized. I'm not going to dedicate that amount of time because it's so manual and it's such a big workload. I'll focus my energies on other things that may be more visible or more immediately prioritized. So this represents a good opportunity to advance our thinking in that post-publication sense with this content tracking capability here.
This is great, Tom. I think, because we hear that a lot, like, wow, this seems like a lot of work to set this all up, but you can't have analytics and strategy without data, as you said. And so, the technology is making it easier and easier to capture that data. Sure, there's going to be some manual input into that process. There always is, and we hope there is, because we like working, right? But understanding that, front loading that process with capturing data around your assets and your talent rights, and then setting up that tracking capability and the technology to go out and monitor it, really unlocks a whole wealth of data that can feed this type of stuff, performance and ROI and reuse and strategy that you didn't have available before, and that seemed, for many people, impossible to get to. Like, yeah, we can't get to this. We'll never get to this. You can get to it if you just kind of have the right strategy from a digital asset management and tracking technology perspective, and you're willing to do a little work up front to set it up. You get a lot of value at the back end of the process.
Totally agreed.
So this has been great, Tom. Really an absolute pleasure to be with you today. And I love the combination of Fidel and ICP because it represents just what I was just talking about, which is kind of data and management and technology plus strategy and analytics and process. And so really a pleasure to be with you today. Over at Fidel, if you want to find out more or you want to check out your content on how it works with that tracking that I showed today, just reach out to us at Solutions@Fidel. We will check out your published content and go through some results with you and show you how it would work, how it would look with some of your own content, and you can learn more about the technology and how it could benefit you.
And yeah, just likewise, Greg, a pleasure to be here, and obviously enjoyed today, but obviously also enjoyed the few hours of rabbiting on to each other about all things DAM and rights and technology in the lead up to this as well. Over at ICP, we have an interactive DAM maturity assessment tool. It takes 15-20 minutes to complete, and it can deliver some good insight about where you're at, sort of in a benchmark, sort of where you're at in that journey, and it can provide some pointers and some insight into what to prioritize or areas to focus on next as well. We touch on usage rights as a part of that too. If you'd like to have a crack at that, or if you have any other questions about some of our experience working with these types of technologies or in this area, please feel free to email me directly, tom.stone@icpnet.com. Thank you very much for listening. I think we'll see if we have any questions. Greg,
yeah,
is that the next?
We definitely got a few minutes for questions if there are any questions.
Thank you, Greg and Tom. That was really insightful presentation. We had some good questions that have come in. So our first question, in terms of right restrictions for assets, are you utilizing automation for capturing the info, or do you rely more heavily on manual entry for capturing and adding the info? If you are using automation, could you make any recommendations for what can be used for this task?
Yeah, great question. We get this question all the time. Automating the process is a little challenging because there's typically two reasons for that. One is that there's no real standardization of kind of contracts, right, or talent contracts. So every place you go, the legal contracts themselves that drive the rights and the rights are derived from are a little bit different. So it's hard to fully automate a product around that. There's some customization you can do around OCR and things like that. It's challenging and takes a lot of work to set that up. The other challenge that you have is that a lot of times that data is flowing through an agency or something like that, so you don't have full control of how or what format it's getting captured in. What we typically see at most customers is there is some do manual entry, but what we typically see is more of a spreadsheet driven methodology where at some point that data is getting captured, extracted from the agreements with the talent into a spreadsheet, and that's getting ingested up in bulk into the system. That's frequently the way we see it. You can also integrate with contract management systems. Again, that would be kind of custom integration that you would do between your rights system and your contract system. So if you're interested in those kinds of things, you want to make sure you're looking for open APIs between your systems that you're using. And I will say that with the AI expansion, we are looking very heavily at how AI can help with that, because AI now brings to the table the capability to look at a contract and be able to understand where the rights data is and extract it. So that's something we're actively looking at Fidel to expand with. But great question. I hope I answered the question okay there.
Would just add, although there isn't like a standard, like a globally standard format, I mean, that you can make the effort to move to a more standardized way of capturing some of that, which means that that manual work to extract that information becomes that little bit easier. We know what we're looking for. We know how we would typically classify these things. The formats of how these are documented make it easy to zoom to the bits where we know the key information is. So there are some sort of internal things that you can do to make that easier. And sort of not so shameless plug that, depending on the capacity of which teams are doing that kind of work within your business, ICP does that as a service for clients that are mutual to Fidel and to ICP as well as others as well. So just something to think about in terms of.
I'm glad you said that, Tom, because I think I skipped right over that part in the demo. I forgot to mention that, just having a rights taxonomy that's defined, there's a benefit because you get standardization. So standardizing the way people talk about rights in an organization is a big value of doing a rights management strategy that has a defined taxonomy. And then, if again, to your point, if you apply that back through your legal process, it makes it easier. Theo?
Great, thank you. So next question, your system shows where the content is out of date on Facebook. Is there a way to directly take the content down directly from your system back to your social media management platforms?
Yeah, great question also. And we are looking at where it makes sense to have those types of integrations. Most customers are using other platforms to publish that content, things like Sprinkler, et cetera, that publish that content out to the social media feeds. So typically there would be an integration, again, it comes back to API capabilities of integration between the platforms to be able to send communications or tasks back and forth. The other way you can handle that we're seeing a lot of customers use is workflow. And so even though you have that going out of another system that's disconnected from your tracking or your rights management system, you have a workflow invoked when you find a violation or an expiration in your tracking, and you invoke a workflow to the team or the people responsible for taking down that content. And in some cases, there may be questions around it. You may want an approval process around that, and that's where workflow can help. The capability to do direct takedowns is absolutely there. Our system doesn't do it today. It's something, again, that we're looking at. Where does it make sense to do that? But again, there's a lot of different flavors at different customers. So how you productize something like that takes some consideration in order to be able to provide value to the widest bunch of customers.
And the other quick thing I'd just add to that, Greg, is that, you know, thinking about, I think in a good content operations perspective, allowing users to do their tasks in the system as they feel most comfortable in is also really important. And if we think about the typical user of Fidel with that oversight, maybe that content management, holistic background, multi-brand sort of view, you know, that's a person that through the reporting and the kind of expiry reports can communicate that information to people who really have their hands on that live content, maybe through different systems like Sprinkler or directly in channel. And so there's often a need to make sure that the right person is doing the right thing with the right information. But, you know, certainly in maybe more nimble businesses, that kind of capability would be interesting to see where it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. We have time for one more, Theo?
Yeah, we have time for one last question. So that is another question on brand vision. Can this be integrated into an existing DAM, or does it run in parallel?
Yeah, great question. And we didn't get into that part of what brand vision does in the demo, but brand vision is like expressly designed to integrate with DAMs, because we understand, perfect segue from what Tom was just saying, right? DAM users want to work in their DAM. They don't want to have to go somewhere else to get rights clearance information. So, the very primary purpose that we developed the product was to provide a more extensible and sophisticated rights management data model that extends the capabilities of your DAM and plugs into your DAM. So we actually do have connectors to many of the larger DAMs out there, OpenText, Adobe, Binder, others. You can reach out to us and get a full list to see if your DAM is one of the DAMs we currently have a connector to. And those connectors provide the capability from within the DAM to register the assets from the DAMs. When you have new assets come into the DAM, they get registered into brand vision. You can attach them to agreements, to talent agreements. You can specify rights at the asset level. And obviously, most importantly, you can get real-time clearance and availability data from within your DAM, so that you can, you know, stay there and do your job and get your usage information. So absolute emphatic yes is the answer to that question. And if you want more details on your specific DAM, you can reach out to us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Greg and Tom, for a great session today. Just a reminder for everyone, the link to access the recording of the session will be sent to you all tomorrow. And also, if you'd like to find out more about our upcoming events, courses, and webinars, please take a look at the Henry Stewart website. Our next in-person DAM conference will be DAM Europe on June 27th and 28th, so please do check that out if you're not already registered. Thank you, everyone, again for attending today's session, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.